The carnivore diet isn't for everyone. Or is it? So a little while back, I put out a video in which I provided all the necessary evidence to show that not only is the carnivore diet optimal, it is optimal for every single person on this entire planet, okay? I drew on a very important point, which is that every species in nature, every animal you can identify, if you look at that species, every member of that species is going to have the same optimal diet. And human beings as a species are no different. We are, by definition, hypercarnivores. So, was I wrong? Hell no, I wasn't wrong. I was 100% correct, and I stand behind everything that I said. However, in this video, I want to offer a concession, okay? Because look, by definition, if we had a dictionary with no agenda, no propaganda, no bias, we would see that humans are obligate hypercarnivores, okay? Done deal, fact, it just is how it is. However, does that mean that the average Joe Blow from the side of the street can just go carnivore overnight, cold turkey, with no knowledge whatsoever of how to actually step into that? I would say no. I got a lot of comments on that last video. You know, many of you guys sharing stories of how you went carnivore and it changed your life in the most incredible ways. And I love to hear that. Please, if you have a story like that, drop it down below. But I also received comments from people sharing how the carnivore diet didn't work for them or didn't work for someone they know. And in this video, I guess I want to kind of troubleshoot that, because I can see many examples that I'm going to go over where that would be the case. Like, yes, this is optimal for every single human. However, that does not mean you can just go into it just like that, no matter who you are, and have no problems at all, okay? Let me use a little analogy to illustrate my point, because I love a good analogy. So humans are, by definition, one of the, if not the, best endurance mammals on the entire planet. We're incredible. The mechanisms of our legs, our ability to sweat, the spring in our in the arch of our foot, it's all afforded us the ability to run these incredible long distances, which would arguably be used to track animals, yada, yada, yada. Now, calling on Joe Blow from the side of the street again, does that mean that if you just pick some random person from the side of the road and say, hey, you're a human, go run an ultra marathon, that they would be able to do it? I would say very infrequently will you find someone that actually fits that bill. So what does that mean? That means, yes, they are a human being and they have this genetic capability, but their lifestyle choices haven't nurtured that ability, and therefore they have lost it. In fact, if you told Joe Blow, hey, you got to run a marathon and you got to finish it and run it at this particular cadence, at this speed, odds are he's probably going to hurt himself. You know, so how does that make any sense? We are the best endurance athlete, and yet you can't do this. Well, it's because nature is so incredibly efficient with its resources. And when I say nature, I mean our bodies. We are nature, right? So when it comes to diet, for example, when you adapt to this overnight, your body has been managing its resources in a way like we've been metabolizing. Likely, however old you are, is how long you've been running on the wrong fuel source, that being carbohydrates. And the organ systems in your body that are more active when you are metabolizing fat and proteins as your predominant sources of fuel, they're gonna be down-regulated. They're gonna have atrophy, so we need time. And there's a few different nuances, not necessarily entirely that I'm gonna dive into in this video. Things you can do wrong that might make you think, oh, this doesn't work for me. But guess what? This is a human's optimal diet. We are hypercarnivores, so let me dive into the areas in which you might have been hung up. Okay, let's go. I think the worst thing you can do, and what ruins results on this diet like no other, is adapting too fast. So many people, you know, myself included, I did this. You learn about the efficacy of this diet. You learn how plants are useless and are just inhibiting your body from absorbing nutrients and poisoning you. And you go, okay, screw plants. I'm just gonna eat meat. That is not a good idea, okay? And not for the reason you might think, okay? Yes, there's a certain adaptation period. The organs that are gonna be metabolizing fat, things like your gallbladder, your intestine, your pancreas, they all need to kind of increase their uptake of activity. And there's a little keto flu. You might feel rough for a couple weeks, yada, yada. But really, that's not an incredibly big deal. By about 2 weeks in, I felt phenomenal. And I think most people do. The problem here, and why I strongly advise that you don't do this, is because of your gut biome, okay? We have trillions of little bacteria living in our gut that are responsible for the breakdown of the final end product of whatever food passes through the rest of our digestive system. Now, these gut bacteria are unique and a reflection of what we put in our mouth. So there are different gut bacteria that favor plants, different ones that favor meat, and even more nuanced, even more than that. So when you swap overnight, your plant favoring bacteria are going to start to die off, and new bacteria are going to proliferate, which favor the remnants of whatever meat makes it through, which is, I guess, arguably going to be quite a bit less, seeing as you actually absorb more of animal foods than plants. There's a lot more waste involved in plants. But this old bacteria that now begins to die off, it doesn't want to die off. Like, you just cut off its food source completely. And what can happen is it can start to gnaw into your intestinal lining and basically lead to complications, lead to intestinal inflammation, constipation, diarrhea, fatigue, all sorts of symptoms, not necessarily right away, but even further down the road. So the gist is, this is not something you want to do. And it's also not something that we understand fully. Our awareness of what goes on in the microbiome is, I think, very limited. It's one of those things like the bottom of the ocean, okay? It's hard to get a full grip on it, but this does seem to have a very real effect. So how do you mitigate this? Oh, and before I go into that, I'll just say, in my own experience, I did go cold turkey. I thought, screw plants. I see the light. I'm going for this. And I felt amazing up till about 6 weeks in. And then I started to get some diarrhea was coming back, some kind of cramping, some stiffness in my gut. And I had to do a series of fasts to resolve this. It's not going to kill you. You can come back from this. It's going to be fine, but save yourself from this ordeal by just adapting slowly. So to mitigate this problem, what I would recommend, and it's something I got from Professor Bart Kay, where basically he recommends to have your vegetable or plant matter every week. So when you start this diet, just cut it in half. And then every week, cut it in half further until around 5 or 6 weeks, you'll probably be at a very minimal amount and you'll just cut it out. What this does is it allows for the leftover bacteria to slowly diminish in size while still actually having a food source, so that when you do kind of do that little cold turkey switch at the end, cutting out your tiny bit for nothing, there's a very small amount of this bacteria left to be able to cause any problem. And likely everything will be fine. So that is my recommendation there. Now, I do want to point out that there's no guarantee of this happening. Like, if you're a strong, healthy person and your gut is relatively sturdy, you could probably switch cold turkey, go overnight, and have no problems. But I would just say it's better to be safe than sorry. And, if you're going cold turkey from, say you've already been eating a lot of meat and lower carbs, more of a ketogenic kind of diet, then this is obviously going to be a breeze of a transition. But for those people that are on a standard American diet, or even worse, like a plant-based diet, which is very high in carbohydrate, it's usually predominantly carbohydrates, then I would really advise considering transitioning over a little more slow. So there you have it. So the next mistake, I think, that really curbs the benefits of this diet is not eating enough fat. And there are actually a lot of nuances where you could, if you are still very conditioned by society, you might not be eating enough, you might not be salting your food enough. We tend to lose a lot of electrolytes as fluids shift in our body going to this diet. But I think one of the biggest ones is not eating enough fat, okay? we have been conditioned to think that fat is the enemy. And if you go to the grocery store, there's things like lean chicken breast, lean ground beef, everything is lean. They are appealing to the consumer because most people think they need to buy lean stuff. And this is a recipe for feeling like crap on this diet. One, it just sounds awful. I mean, I've been carnivore for many months now, and the idea of eating lean ground beef or a lean chicken breast, it's absolutely repulsive. Like I want the fat. And not having enough fat is basically not having enough energy in your diet. So also fat is really important for a whole bunch of functions, your hormonal balances in your body. If you switch to this diet, but keep it too lean, not enough fat, you're going to feel crappy. You're going to think this isn't working. So that's another very important thing. I'm going to make a whole video in the future talking about how to adapt to this diet and with all the different nuances, when to eat, what to eat, how to eat, different symptoms and how you deal with them. But for this video, I'm just going to say eat enough fat. Eat enough and eat enough fat. Okay. Next, I want to talk about food intolerances because I think some people go on this diet thinking, well, I can just eat all the animal products I want and I'll feel great. And then they maybe don't, and they think, well, what gives, right? And it's unfortunate, but just because you've switched to an animal-based diet doesn't mean you're immune from any potential food intolerances, okay? The safest food that we should all be able to eat, and we see this, like people with the most severe autoimmune conditions can basically only function best when they eat beef. They just eat ruminant animals. This makes sense from an evolutionary perspective because this is what we evolved eating, these large beasts, these large animals that would feed us for days. There's no, we didn't become obligate hypercarnivores from hunting chickens and little lean animals. We became this way by hunting big beasts. And so that is naturally the most natural food for our body that you really can't go wrong with, okay? Now, sadly, things like eggs, poultry, dairy, seafood, all of these, while if they work for your body, that's great. Absolutely include them. They're delicious, they're phenomenal, they're healthy. But these foods can actually trigger some sort of inflammatory response in your body. And for people that are very sensitive, I know people personally that have told me, oh yeah, the carnivore diet didn't work for me at all. But they didn't factor in the fact that they were eating foods that could still have been potentially problematic for them. So things like eggs, dairy, seafood, poultry, all of those can be problematic. And if you're on a carnivore diet, but you're not experiencing the relief from the symptomology that you think you should be, try bringing it down to a true elimination diet of just red meat, just ruminant animals. Basically, you're only eating vegans, animals that eat grass. And then go from there. Try and add in a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Try egg yolks before egg whites. They're all these little nuances. So yeah, that's an area that I think people go wrong sometimes. You think, carnivore should just work. Well, sometimes you have to go even deeper than that. And just a little caveat on that, if you feel like you need to go on a fully lion diet, which is what Michaela Peterson has coined it, it's not actually the end of the world. I eat mostly a lion diet. I eat a little bit of butter, the odd egg, the odd seafood, but most days I just eat beef and beef fat, and I love it. So don't think it has to be miserable. It's actually incredible. Okay, moving on. Another problem I've seen is people eating excessive amounts of organ meat. And this is a kind of an interesting topic in the carnivore community because you have these charlatans that are preaching, oh my God, just eat all the organ meats you can, eat the testicle, the liver, the pancreas, the lung, the heart, eat it all day, every day. It's so many good nutrients. And while yes, that is true, there's also such thing as getting too many nutrients. Vitamin A, for example, that can be toxic in too high of quantities. And we know from anecdotes of people alive eating a carnivore diet right now and from indigenous groups like the Inuit that the absolute requirement for a healthy person on a carnivore diet of organ meat is 0. It's none at all. We don't actually need it. Everything that we require is found within the muscle meats in the quantities that we need it. However, I will say that when you're starting this diet, you're probably very nutritionally deficient. I know I was. I was plant-based for years, and then plant-based in combination with poor digestion. So basically, plants that don't digest well coupled with bad digestion as well, it made for a very malnourished body. And when I started this diet, I really enjoyed organ meats. Like if I had a plate for dinner that didn't have a little bit of liver or kidney or heart, which were the big three that I went for, I would feel a bit like, oh, I wish I had that, you know? And when you're on a carnivore diet, you can trust your natural satiety hunger signals. Like what tastes good is likely tasting good as long as it's within the carnivore realm, because your body wants those nutrients. Now, at some point, I think the natural progression, if you were nutritionally deficient like I was, is you start to lose that taste. And when you lose a taste for liver, for example, that doesn't mean you should switch to a desiccated supplement because you really need to get it. If your body's saying don't eat it, that's because it doesn't want it, okay? Plain and simple. I think include organ meats if you want, just don't go nuts. And I would say keep in mind, if anything, the ratio that these were actually available to humans for the entirety of our evolution, okay? One animal has one liver, okay? If you look at a cow, I think the carcass, when it's all cut up and packaged, you'd have about 500 pounds of muscle meat and associated fat, okay? 500 pounds of edible meats. You'll have about 10 pounds of liver, 10 to 15 maybe, but let's say 10, okay? That means that about 2% of the meat from that animal is liver. So think about when you're eating liver to have it in that proportion. Like for every 1 kilo of beef, you could have about 20 grams of liver, and that would be evolutionarily appropriate, okay? There's just some guidelines to think about. And you know, a little tangent on this. So we know Paul Saladino, Carnivore MD, I think he calls himself. He was a huge proponent of bringing in carbs and stuff. He was experiencing heart palpitations and fatigue and trouble sleeping on this carnivore diet. And it's just a theory, but you must remember how intelligent the body is. And we know that fiber, which only comes from plants, is actually, it inhibits the absorption of nutrients, minerals, into our body. It was actually coined in the 60s or 70s as a weight loss remedy because they recognized that it inhibits the absorption of the food that we're eating. So my theory is that potentially Paul, he felt influenced to reintroduce carbs and felt better on carbs because he was saturating his body with more and more of these vitamins that his body was being, you know, we're getting to a toxic level, and the introduction of plants back into his diet inhibited some of the absorption of those nutrients, thus making him feel better. And in line with that caveat, I will say, if you're on a hyper-carnivore diet, but you do include more plants in your diet, it might be worth considering eating more organ meats, right? Because you are inhibiting the absorption of nutrients with that plant fiber. So that's kind of something to consider. But purely carnivore, I would say really don't stress about organ meats. They're not essential. Just have them if you like them. Okay.
Frodo, don't give in. Not now.
The next topic of concern is just for those people who are so sick. I think there's many examples of people that go onto this diet and you're just so unwell. There's so much, you know, oftentimes problems with the gut and inflammation that the carnivore diet just doesn't seem to have much of an effect because you're just so damn sick. And for those people, I would say keep in mind that diet isn't everything. It is a very large piece of the puzzle, but it's not the entire puzzle. So in my personal experience, before I went carnivore, I did a 22-day water fast, which was an incredible opportunity for my body to rest. Fasting promotes cell autophagy. It promotes the release of adult stem cells. Like it gives your body, it affords your body an opportunity to heal. And I'm certain that I would not be experiencing this level of well-being on this carnivore diet had I not taken that kind of preliminary step to allow my body to heal before moving on to this diet. And just quickly, I just want to point out, like, I'm not recommending that everyone out there watching this video goes and fasts for 3 weeks. It's a big ordeal, and I highly recommend, I recommend doing it. I think it'd be incredible for most people, but I recommend seeking out help. Reach out to myself or just someone and get a bit of guidance before you do that, because it's, it can be a bit of a unique experience, just to say the least. So yeah, fasting was absolutely imperative to allow my body enough strength on this diet to be able to do some rebuilding and renovating. The other thing I do, which I would highly recommend, is I take a nutraceutical stem cell supplement. Now, the beauty of a carnivore diet, as we know, is that you don't need to supplement on it, okay? Because the nature of this diet is that we get everything we need from the diet itself. In the same that no animal in nature needs to supplement, ideally on this diet, and in most circumstances, you wouldn't need to either. However, there is an amazing opportunity to do a little bit of biohacking. So basically the supplement I take, it upregulates the release of adult stem cells. And if you were watching South Park in the early 2000s, you will know that stem cells are absolutely phenomenal. Stem cells are able to become nearly any cell in the body, and they effectively are renewing and replacing the cells that create this damaged, diseased tissue, and thus our organ systems, wherever we have chronic inflammation, is afforded an opportunity to heal. And this is incredibly valuable because our ability, like, we always have unlimited stem cells, but our ability to release them, it is inhibited with age and also with stress. None of us are I would say none of us, I highly doubt anyone on earth looks biologically the age they should be. We're all aging prematurely, and the lack of stem cells in our bloodstream to facilitate renewing and repairing tissue is a big catalyst for this. So I take a supplement that encourages more stem cells in my body, and it's an amazing thing. Anyways, I would highly recommend getting on this train as well. There's information for how you can get some of this stuff down below. Feel free to contact me. Yeah, it's incredible, magical stuff. So yeah, to wrap up this point, for those of you who are just so sick, and trust me, I know what it's like to be there, before you resign to the idea that this diet just isn't working for you, consider that it's not the only piece of the puzzle, okay? Things like getting in the sun, optimizing your sleep, water fasting, touching the earth every day, taking a dope stem cell supplement, like all of these are other pieces that are gonna help you get back to optimal health. And I really encourage you to explore all of those ideas before you say, oh, this diet didn't work, okay? It's more than just diet. Okay, next. So the last thing I want to touch on briefly is oxalate dumping. And I think at this point, very little is understood about oxalates, but the gist of it is this. Oxalates are a plant toxin or oxalic acid, and among probably others, it's known to be a pretty bad one, because what happens is as you're eating plants your entire life, there's a buildup of this oxalate in your tissues. And when you finally remove oxalates from your diet in, for example, a carnivore diet, your body's like, okay, let's cleanse, let's get this stuff out, and you can experience a plethora of symptoms. It's kind of hard, I think, to really know if you're oxalate dumping because it can manifest in a variety of different ways. There's a book by Sally Norton. It's called Toxic Superfoods, I'm pretty sure, which I have not read yet, but I'm pretty sure she dives very in detail about this topic in this book. And there's, again, just to kind of give you more resources, there's a YouTube channel I'd recommend if you want to learn more about this. It's called EO Nutrition. That's EO Nutrition. And he is really knowledgeable on oxalates. And yeah, my basic understanding is that it works in the same way that the body works to detoxify from most things, in that when you stop consuming it, it finally tries to get rid of it. It's like, say you're hungover. Actually having a little bit of a drink can stem the hangover because your body goes from excreting the disastrous effects of the alcohol to, oh, well, we're putting more in, so might as well wait. And that's why you feel better. Like, I guess a good analogy would be the the body doesn't like to shovel its driveway until it's sure it's done snowing. So that is why we experience this oxalate dumping. And yeah, it can manifest in a wide variety of things, and it's still not very widely understood. So that could be another problem someone experiences on a carnivore diet. Like, bottom line, if you were just raised on a carnivore diet from birth and you ate nutritious foods and fats and all the best quality meats, you would never have any problems. You'd be the healthiest bugger on the planet, okay? But we have all lived in these unique ways and gone down these unique health holes, I will call them, and we are all uniquely deficient in unique ways. So we're all gonna have a unique experience getting back on this diet. And yeah, those are kind of some concerns and problems that you might need to troubleshoot. I just laid them all out for you. And just remember, when all is said and done, there is no prize, there is no medal given out at the end of the year to the most adherent, strict carnivore, okay? The purpose of this is to feel good. Your diet should make you feel as good as possible. So these are kind of ways to troubleshoot if it wasn't working for you. But at the end of the day, do whatever works for you. If you want to bring in some plants and you feel like that helps for whatever reason, do it, okay? Just maybe explore different nuances. That's all I'm saying. So yeah, to wrap up this video, I think there's a lot of hurdles, speed bumps you can encounter when you start this diet. And that doesn't mean that it's not optimal for humans, because it is, right? But maybe you swapped cold turkey and 6 months down the line, you're experiencing some gut problems. Maybe you still have other food intolerances, even within the animal foods kingdom. Maybe you're just phenomenally sick and you need other factors to help support your health. Maybe you're oxalate dumping, okay? And there's probably more things that I just can't think of, but just keep in mind, guys, like, if you do want to get in touch, if you want a little bit of extra support, or you want just to have someone in your corner, feel free to reach out. You can contact me via some sort of link down below. Also, if you want to get your hands on this dope stem cell product, the link is also down below. Check that out. Highly recommend. Yeah, I hope this was helpful. I love you guys, and just have a fantastic day.